I had a ton of fun sharing 10, maybe 11 more basic stencil techniques. Look at these cards. They're so pretty. They all have a different technique. And I'm going to share with you how to create each of these stencil backgrounds to make really cute, really inspiring, sentimental, proud, and totally amazing cards, all with stencils. Let's jump into project number one. Now, project number one, stencil technique is just ink blending through your stencil. Very traditional ink blending through the stencil. I had to switch it up a little bit, and I used several colors here to make kind of an ombre effect with my stencil. But basically, I'm just holding the stencil down. I'm using magnets on a magnetic glass mat, but you could use sticky spray or tape or whatever, or if you're just very good at holding it down, you could just hold it down and get a very simple, this is exactly how a stencil works design. It's just ink blending through the stencil, nothing spectacular or stellar. And this is a card that I made. I did stamp over top and added some cute sushi. The second technique I wanted to share with you today is stenciling over colored cardstock. This is a tree stencil, like a tree ring. It says right on there, tree ring. It's a Colorful Life design stencil. And I am just stenciling with a few Distress Oxides. I thought that they would show up a little bit better on this colored cardstock. And just mixing some browns and kind of orangey, rusty tones in order to get this tree stencil on this colored cardstock. And so you can get kind of a neat design. And there's the card that I made with that, which is a Father's Day card. The third design, or the third stencil technique I wanted to share, was creating a scene with a stencil. This took me a little bit longer, and I do make a mistake. I will show you like the mistake. What I should have done is used some kind of sticky spray, like pixie spray or something, on one of my stencil layers, and it would have kept me from having the mistake. But this is just a stencil set that's made to create a background, and I just used it as it was intended. These are mountain ranges, and if you flip it over, you get the mask for the mountains. It's actually really cool. I enjoy scene building, even with dies and in just regular stamps. I just enjoy it. See here, I used the mask part to go back over because I wanted that mountain range to be a little bit darker. And I just flipped it over, switched it around. I did make sure I cleaned my stencil off, and I am adding purple because Purple Mountain's Majesty, you know. I just thought it would be kind of fun. I just enjoy everything that you can do to make a scene. And then I did ink blend a little bit of blue on this background, and now I'm going to go in and add some fluffy clouds. It's been a while since I used the stencils, but this is my favorite cloud stencil. It just has these very organic edges to it. You can flip it around, twist it, turn it, all sorts of stuff, so that it actually really does look like a puffy, cloudy sky. This stencil did not come with the stencil group. I will pull out that cloud stencil too, and I will use it a little bit to add just a little bit different texture inside the clouds. Here I'm just deepening up that connection, or the transition between the mountains and the sky. I wanted to make sure that it was a little bit deeper, darker there. Here's the stencil that actually came with the kit. I'm just going to use a couple of them just to add a little bit of puffy clouds. And then this is where I should have used some pixie spray. The reason I'm using oxides here is because they will lay over top of the other inks and cover them up basically. I could have like stenciled this first and then stenciled everything around it. This one, I don't think it has like masks for the trees, and if it did at one point, it doesn't now. But the center between those two trees here was moving and shifting, and I did get a little bit of a kind of a mistake that I'll go ahead and show and kind of cover up. But here I was just adding some darker color over top to kind of cover the background so that I get those trees. I think this is where it really got all smooshy and not the greatest. See right there. Anyway, use some pixie spray when you're doing this, but this is a really cool technique, and I didn't really need much to do that. See where that problem is? I was very sad, but I covered it up with a helicopter, and there's the card that I made. I think he turned out really cool. Now, another technique that you can do with stencils is something called Zentangle. In my first video of the basic techniques, I shared how you could use a pen to just outline the stencil, and that's how this starts. I just have this bubble circle stencil, and I am going to just draw in all the circles. And then I'm going to turn this into something called a Zentangle. A Zentangle is basically just a design that has a bunch of little tiny designs inside of it. So in order to eat an elephant, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you make a Zentangle? One little tiny image at a time. Here I'm filling in all of the circles with different little doodles, with polka dots and swirls and triangles and stripes and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to go ahead and fill in all of the spaces that I outlined from my stencil first. And this is a really good way to start a Zentangle, but you don't need to start with a stencil, but I did here. And now I'm going to connect each of these circles, and then I'm going to doodle in the middle. You could use different colors. One time I did a Zentangle where I then scanned it into my computer and resized it after I had done it, and then created my own pattern paper. It was actually really neat, and this is a very good technique for just doodling and just, I don't know, messing around and kind of keeping your brain occupied. It's very good to build creativity, I guess. If you were stuck, this is something really good to do. Here, this isn't the most pretty thing, but the card that I make with it is pretty freaking awesome. So I definitely, I don't know, I'd recommend this. But yeah, it was just really cool. I just drew in all those little spaces, and this is the card that I made with that. Isn't it cute? Oh my gosh, I think it's so cute. And I made sure that my image was very, very vibrant. So this technique didn't actually work out the way it was supposed to. This should be the brayer technique, where you should be able to put a brayer over top of your stencil, but I used a stencil that was just a little thicker, so I ended up spritzing it with water, flipping it over, and using my brayer on top. And here is the card that I created with that. Just a beautiful wedding card. Another technique that you can do is stenciling over a background image. Like here is some text in the background, and I am going to stencil over top of this with some color, so you get this textured layered background. And here is the card that I made with this using the eclipse technique. The next technique is stamping over top of a stencil, kind of backwards from what we just did. And this this background is my least favorite out of all of them, and the card was the hardest to make, but it is super cute. I think it's adorable. And the next technique is totally amazing. This one is stenciling over top of patterned paper. And this stencil here reminded me of like ocean currents, not waves, but currents. And I just thought, I just had this idea that I was going to add turtles to this, which I do, and I think that the card turned out totally amazing. Isn't that neat? Look at this card. It's so cute. I don't know. I think it turned out great. Another technique you can do with your stencils is, these are layered stencils. I was going to do selective inking on this stencil here, which is why you see me just doing the cherries first, but then I decided to do that on a different stencil, which you've seen in the very first video with my basic stencil techniques. So here I decided to do all the red layer then, and I smooshed on my darker color, and then I do go back and blend with my lighter color just to blend everything out, and I think I get a much more concentrated, that's not the word, saturated color. I'm just using some teeny tiny cheapo blending brushes to do this, And I loved how this stencil turned out, and these ones are just layered, so each layer has its own stencil and you just line them up. Here I used red on one layer, this is the greens, and I'm going to use 2 different color greens here as well, just to get a little bit of shading, a little bit of differentiation. And I'll do the same thing where I just add a little bit, and then the ink that's on the stencil will then swirl around with my new ink, and then I get this very saturated blended color over top. So like I said, you get 3 stencils here. One was a red layer, then the green layer, and then this one is yellow. This one has pineapples and bananas and lemons, I think. And where I kind of screwed up is I wasn't going to put the pineapples in the lemon layer. I was just going to use the red and the green, but there are pineapple tops in the green, and therefore, oh, and lemon, the lemon leaves. So therefore I had to do them all. And I did brown as my shading here, yellow, and then a little bit of brown. You can see the part that's on the actual stencil itself, because I'm using the little brush, it blends, and then I get this kind of shaded color that goes in. So here, look at how cute this is. It's so vibrant and bright, and this is the card I made with that. The next technique is stenciling over another stencil. So here I am just going to fill in my stencil with, I think this is a Simon Hurley ink. I think it might be the only one I own. So I just stenciled in the florals here, and then I'm going to take a second stencil that has a smaller pattern. I'm going to leave the first stencil in place, and I am going to stencil this heart stencil over the top, and it will just show up in the flowers. You could do this with all sorts of things. This is just what I grabbed first. I guess I looked for a stencil that had a larger, like a bunch of larger openings, and then something that had a smaller pattern in order to create this design, and just shifted it over. It's not that big of a deal, and I used I think a purple over the top, but it all blends together and you get this really pretty heart pattern inside the flowers. And this is the card that I made with that. Isn't that pretty? The next technique is swiping the ink pad over the stencil, and in my first basic stencil technique video, I used this stencil, and there was 2 additional techniques that I used with this technique, like 2 finish techniques that I did with this inking technique. But this was the 3rd one, and I left that one for this video. So I'm just rubbing the ink pad and then swiping it through, and this is the card that I made with that. Just this beautiful soft wedding card that I thought was just stunning. Those are my cards for today. I hope you enjoyed my video, and I hope to see you next time when we share a little bit more advanced techniques. And as I always say, give cards generously. Bye!